I have a question for you guys. Where in your life are you asking for permission and seeking validation? I'm a Leo. I love a bit of validation. I just wanted someone to be like, yes, okay, you're fine. Well done. Good job. It's so important to learn to self-validate and just be like, I'm happy. I'm happy. It doesn't matter what other people say. Learning to give yourself praise for those wins is so important, because then you don't rely on the other people to tell you that you're doing a good job. Can you do that? Can you take 5 minutes every day and just write it down and work through it and challenge yourself? Because if you can, then you're learning to stop caring what other people think. Hi everyone, welcome to the Reclaiming Bossy podcast. My name is Mahika, and today I want to start by talking about something that's so important. I have a question for you guys. Where in your life are you asking for permission and seeking validation? Because I often get asked by people, how do you stop caring what people think about you? And this is so important. And my answer to this has changed because a few years ago, I made a podcast episode about this and about the courage to be disliked. But I think rather than caring about what people think about you, because that's human and that's natural and that's like a survival instinct, we will care about what people think about us because we're communal people, that's survival. That's something that's wired into us. Rather than trying to get rid of caring what people think, I think what's more productive is to ask yourself, where in my life am I seeking permission? And where in my life am I seeking validation? And how can I bring that down and learn to give myself permission and give myself validation so that I can have self-belief and just go after what I want. Now, I want to talk about this in different areas of my life and where I've found this whole permission validation loop to be a really big thing. And then hopefully you can see that in your own life and break it down and learn to self-permit and self-validate, because that is where real change starts. And I am excited for us because we're going to be in giving ourselves the permission, the validation, and the agency to do whatever the hell we want. It's a self-belief era. And so I want to talk about it. So asking for permission from people is, again, so normal. I think it's also a cultural thing depending on what background you come from. I'm Indian. I grew up like asking permission from my family, from my parents, from my community, from my teachers, and seeking validation, academic validation, validation from, again, family, community, society, friends, men. And it's something that I felt kept me safe. When you have the permission to do something, you can operate between the guidelines. And then when you have the validation, you get cheered on, you're operating in the right path. And so it feels really safe to constantly seek permission and validation. But growing into my 20s and kind of doing unconventional things, starting a business as young as I did, having this podcast for the last few years, trying to do things differently in my health, in my friendships, in my life in general, I've started to learn that you can't constantly seek permission and validation from others. Also, when you learn to rely on the praise of the people around you, then it makes your worth and your happiness very conditional. I realized that I grew up really constantly seeking well done and applause from the people that I cared about so much that when I would get it, I would feel very empty inside, and I would just want to get to the next point and the next milestone. And it just wasn't fulfilling. I was like, oh, I'm seeking so much validation. And there's nothing wrong with wanting validation. I think, again, that's human, that's normal. But the question is, can you learn to self-validate? Because there will be moments where you do something, and if you're doing something just for you, where maybe people won't give you the praise that you want. And you have to learn to give it to yourself and to really feel it if that's something that you crave. I'm a Leo. I love a bit of validation. I need it to feel happy. But I'm learning slowly that I can give it to myself, not just through words of affirmation and affirmations and all that stuff, but through other actions. And so I want to talk about different areas of life. Let's start with health, because that's something that's really been on my mind. Ways that I've been seeking permission in health. I felt like it was an area of my life that I really didn't know that much about. I was never the sportiest person. I didn't know that much about nutrition. I'm not the best cook. And so I would constantly seek permission from those around me that I felt were in a better place of do you think I should try this diet? Do you think I should do this? How are you doing this? How are you doing that? And then validation of am I doing enough? Am I healthy enough? Am I fit enough? Am I pretty enough? All this kind of stuff. And so with the permission piece, one thing that I'm starting to do this year is, instead of New Year's resolutions and following any plans or challenges or diets, I'm learning how can I give myself permission to create better health in a way that's so individual and unique to me. And in order to do that, you have to do like a PhD in yourself. And so how can you find out more information about yourself? For me, this was going and getting blood tested, getting like an aura ring and doing all the biomarkers. It doesn't have to be so expensive. There's other ways that you can figure out, like cycle syncing, or figuring out like your Ayurvedic type, or doing other stuff, and to just be like, what are my intolerances? What are my problems that I like in my body? I struggle with, for example, feeling energy. I get really tired. And so like, what supplements am I lacking? All this kind of stuff. You need to know, because there is no one size fits all diet that will work for everyone. There is no one size fits all exercise that will work for everyone. There's so many of my friends that are in the reformer Pilates era. I kind of hate it. I kind of find it like not fun. And I know that's a hot take, and I love that there's so many people that like it, and I maybe will give it another chance. But I'm looking into different forms of movement that work for me, that bring me enjoyment. And the same with nutrition. There were so many diets that like seemed like they would work, or out there that of like how you should eat. You should have 100 grams of protein every single day, or you should have like X amount of carbs and calories and all this stuff. And that just did not feel good to me. It felt very restrictive. It felt very anxiety inducing. And so right now, like I said, I'm doing a PhD in myself, and I'm seeing these are my intolerances. This is what caused me inflammation. This is what makes me feel bad. And how can I learn to bring joy and create like a new plan for my nutrition without relying on the permission from the people around me that what I'm doing is correct. You just have to go through your own trial and error. And the same with exercise. How am I going to create a movement routine that works better for me, rather than doing what I felt like everyone was telling me that I should do, of like push-pull legs, or like I said, Pilates, or all this stuff around women's health of like how you should and shouldn't exercise and behave and fast and all these things. I'm now checking in with myself, and I'm like, how did that feel? And one thing I've really been getting into recently is hot yoga. I really enjoy it because it's something that gives me like strength, mobility, flexibility, but I don't necessarily, like, it's not something that was recommended to me. It's just something that I intuitively felt like I needed to do. And then same with like acne and all the stuff. This is the first time in my life that I'm struggling with acne, and it's really bad. It's really like a lot. And again, permission. I was like seeking out from all the people that I know that were struggling with their skin and everything online and in my real life. Like, should I go on Accutane? Should I try this? Should I try that? But then I'm giving myself the permission to also just show up imperfectly. Like, yes, okay, I'm working on my skin and feeling better and looking better and all this stuff. But I feel like often we hesitate because we think that we're not perfect and we think that we're not worthy. It's so scary to me to be sitting in front of you guys with the camera in my face and these studio lights and everything, talking about not caring what people think, knowing that I have the worst skin I've ever had, and knowing that people could say stuff about it in the comments and all this stuff. But then again, how do you give yourself permission to still show up, and validation? So let's talk about the validation piece. Like I said, acne, but also with bodies, like women's bodies, you have like stretch marks and all this stuff. I remember I was 12 the first time I looked up like bikini body and was looking up like thigh gap, cellulite, stretch marks, all this stuff. And it's just so disempowering. I think like, yes, okay, insecurity is human, normal, natural, part of the process. But there is a big difference between having insecurities and being insecure. I still have many insecurities, but I try and be a secure person in the sense that it doesn't stop me from living my life and doing things that I wanted. I remember there are so many years of my teenage experience that I didn't fully enjoy moments of my life. Forget teenage experiences. I think to like moments reasonably recently where I was so obsessed with like, oh my God, I don't feel like I look good. The picture's gonna look bad, like all this stuff. And I just didn't enjoy those moments of my life as much. It wasn't fully present. So how can you learn to self-validate of my worth is not conditional based on the fluctuations of my skin, my weight, my body, all this stuff, and give yourself that validation? Because if not, you're gonna seek it out from the people around you, from your friends, from social media, from your romantic relationships. This is something that I started to do a little bit once I got into my previous relationship, where I really just wanted my ex to give me validation that I was pretty and I was worthy because I didn't feel good in myself. And that's like a slippery slope, because then you put your worth and your esteem in the hands of other people. And so okay, you have your affirmations, and that's really important. I'm a big advocate of affirmations. But if you're in a state where you really don't feel good, affirmations is hard to get into because it just doesn't feel true. I think another way that you can learn to self-validate in health and beauty is know what makes you feel and look good in yourself. So for me, I know there's certain ways that I can dress that make me feel super confident, or certain perfumes or smells and all that kind of stuff. And that really helps me with validation. And then also like still showing up. Like I said, I felt some kind of way about showing up to the studio today because I don't feel like I look my best, but I still did it. And that is validating that I can do it, that I'm worthy, that I will show up no matter how I feel and look. And that is so, so important. Next, I want to talk about, again, I've touched on this a little bit with relationships, but where do we ask for permission? I asked for permission so much because I wasn't sure when the right time was to start looking for my previous relationship, because there's this whole narrative of it happens when you least expect it and you shouldn't want it. And it's like unfeminist to want a relationship. I really felt that. I felt like it was very un-girl boss to like want love. I felt like that was a hot take. And this was the time where the whole "is it embarrassing to have a boyfriend" article was coming out. And here I was like ready for my first relationship and really wanting it. And I had to stop asking people for permission of like, is it okay to want love? Is it okay to want a relationship? And I just was like, okay, well, I'm the kind of person where if I want something, I make time, I make space for it, and I just do it. And I decided that I'm going to give myself permission to create space for that. And I went into this challenge where I went on 1 day a week for a short period of time. And I did a little check-in vlog with myself before and after each date to see like, how am I feeling? Do I like the person? What are my boundaries? What are my standards? And I met my ex-boyfriend on week 2 of this challenge. And so giving yourself permission to want relationships and date. Again, I'm saying this because I know that there's going to be a lot of girl bosses watching this that are going to be like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like, it feels embarrassing to like want relationships, want love. No, it's not. Give yourself permission to want, and you can also give yourself permission to not want relationships or love as well. You can be like, I'm not in an era of my life where I want that. I had that for a long time. For like 2 or 3 years of my life, I just was like, I want to be selfish. I'm giving myself permission to be selfish and not talk to anyone and not have anything going on. I really want to focus on my career, focus on my health, focus on my life. And I'm kind of re-entering that phase right now. So give yourself permission to be in whatever era you want. Then I think once you actually get into a relationship, yes, okay, you have the boundaries of the other person and your boundaries, and that's something that you should talk about. But stop seeking permission from your partner to do stuff. Just go out and do what you want to do with your career, with your life, whatever. Again, you have to be respectful of the other person's boundaries if they've said that that makes them uncomfortable. But make sure that you bring your own boundaries into the conversation as well. So, so, so important. And then another thing is like seeking permission from the people around you. I fell into this where when I got into my first relationship, because I was so unsure, like, am I making the right decision? Am I making the right decision? I kept asking the people in my life, my friends, my family, my brother, ChatGPT, is this the right relationship for me? Like, is this the right thing? Is this the right thing? Tell me that it's going to be okay, kind of thing. And no one can really give you that answer. My friends were like, you have to make that decision yourself. You have to know that that's okay. And how can you form your own opinion? And obviously talk about the stuff that bothers you with the people in your life. And I'm so lucky that my friends listened to me when I was going through the ups and downs of that previous relationship. But at the same time, you have to form your own opinion on stuff. And this is something that I really think is like so important across the board, not just with romantic relationships, but with work, with friendships, with life. Sharing with the people around you is so important, but you need to form your own opinion first. And you have to self-permit first. And so how can you form your own opinions? Silence, make space and time. I love journaling. I'm a big journaler, but that might not resonate for you. What else can you do? Can you voice note yourself? Can you go and step out of your environment and think like let me try something new, to give myself time and space to form an opinion. And then you can go and speak to the people around you. I used to fall into the trap of not wanting to make any of my own decisions because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself to choose the right partner for myself. I didn't trust myself to choose the right health or the career or the right habits for myself. So I'd keep asking people for permission. I'd keep going and finding mentors and experts and friends that were a few steps ahead of me and being like, how do I do this? But whilst that's so important, seeking out advice, seeking out inspiration, seeking out templates, you have to juggle that with knowing what you want, knowing what you believe, knowing what you think. And you have to give yourself space at the table to make those decisions, to have those thought processes, which is very scary, but so important. Now we move on to the validation piece. With relationships, there's so much. Again, wanting the other person to validate you is important. It's nice to feel loved and feel good by the people in your life, especially your romantic partner. But this is something that sometimes I struggle with, where I will want so much validation from the other person and I'll forget to give it to myself. And so, yes, okay, again, you can do it through words of affirmation. That's something that's very important to me. And when me and my ex broke up, I got this jar, and every time I felt bad about like the relationship or missing them or whatever, I put a reason that I liked myself in the jar. But again, everyone has different love languages. You can learn to self-validate doing other things, through doing nice things for yourself, acts of service, through quality time, spending good quality time with yourself. Take yourself on a solo date. Through, what were the other ones? Gifts. Get yourself little things if you can. Like, you don't have to splurge a lot of money. It can just be little gestures. I always get myself flowers when I do my groceries because it makes me feel super special. It makes me feel super validated. And then I think also surrounding yourself with people that make you feel special and validated, but make sure that those people do the same for themselves as well, because then they won't resent the fact that you're self-validating and self-permitting. They will find that inspiring because you are the average of the people you surround yourself with. So validation in relationships in that way is so important. But then also, again, seeking that validation that you are in the right thing for yourself. When I got into my past relationship, like I said, I kept speaking to the people around me, being like, is this the right person for me? Is this the right person for me? I just wanted someone to be like, yes, okay, you're fine. Well done. Good job. But it's so important to learn to self-validate and just be like, I'm happy. I'm happy. It doesn't matter what other people say. Or I'm unhappy. It doesn't matter what people say. I think that's a big thing. For a lot of people, they're scared to leave relationships because they're like, what will people say to me? You have to learn that your joy, your safety, your feeling good in yourself is the compass, and other people's opinions will constantly change. There will always be someone that has something to say about something that you're doing. But you know what? There's also so many people that you don't think of that are rooting for you. And I want to bring this onto career now, because this is something that I really feel. This is something I've really struggled with the validation, the permission piece, because like I said, I started my own company. And when I was starting the process, felt like I had to ask everyone around me, like, is this the right thing? Is this the right thing? Am I doing okay? Am I doing enough? Am I good enough? Can I do this? And it was really hard, but ultimately I ended up doing it because I was just like, okay, we're just going to give ourselves permission to give it a go. And if it doesn't work, we'll go get a job. If it doesn't work, we'll figure it out. You have to sometimes give yourself permission to take that leap. Especially if it's unconventional. I think watching a lot of the people around me going and getting traditional corporate jobs, getting really well-paid jobs, was scary because I was going out on a limb and doing my own thing with no idea of like, how am I going to provide for myself? How am I going to make money? How am I going to be successful? I don't want to make the wrong decision. But sometimes you just have to give yourself permission to take a chance on yourself. And I think it helps when you remind yourself that no decision is irreversible. I mean, maybe there's some, but like most decisions are not irreversible. You can take the first step in your career and then decide, that was not for me. I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to try again. It does not matter. Give yourself permission to do that scary thing. And in career, I want you to ask yourself, like, where are places that I'm seeking permission from other people? When I started my company, like I said, I had so many business mentors, and I'd ask them, should I do my website like this? Should I do this like this? Should I do this like this? And I think seeking out mentorship and advice is so important. Being coachable is so important. Learning from the people a few steps ahead of you is so important. But if you keep bouncing from people's advice, you will never learn to discern what you think, what you believe, and what you know is right. And that's a very scary place to be, especially when you're doing your own thing, because how can you build your own thing if you don't trust yourself? And so I think building self-trust is so important. And the first step is to give yourself permission to do something, to make mistakes, and to trust that if you make a mistake or if you make the wrong decision, no decision is irreversible. So what can you do? How can you improve? And it's the same with the validation piece of because I did something unconventional with my career, I found it really exciting that all of a sudden all these people were like, wow, it's so interesting. That's so cool. You're so cool. But that started to die down once it became more normal. And I found that really like stressful. I was like, oh my God, people aren't telling me I'm doing a good job anymore. Maybe I'm not doing a good job. And like, I started to feel very stressed about it. But how can you learn to self-validate in your career? For me, one of those things is creating like a trophy cabinet of wins. I have this camera album in my camera roll where I document all the little wins. And then when I'm having a bad day, when I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough, I go through the camera roll and I see, oh my God, we did this. We pitched to big brands like Google and Chanel. We went to the House of Lords. We grew a team. We have an office. We did all of this stuff. Well done. And I think learning to give yourself praise for those wins is so important, because then you don't rely on the other people to tell you that you're doing a good job. I think another thing is with the validation piece is working with your limiting beliefs. And I always talk about this, but knowing what your limiting beliefs are is so important. And so write them down, because if you don't write them down, you can't reframe them. And I'm a big fan of this journal exercise where you get a table, put limiting belief on one side, reframe on the other, and you write them down and then you do the reframe. It takes 66 days to rewire a limiting belief. And so if you start today with documenting all your limiting beliefs and working on actively reframing them, imagine how confident and unstoppable you're going to be in 66 days. That's just over 2 months. Can you do that? Can you take 5 minutes every day and just write it down and work through it and challenge yourself? Because if you can, then you're learning to stop caring what other people think. And not only are you learning to stop caring what other people think, you're learning to deconstruct your limiting beliefs, which is so powerful. How can you learn to self-validate and self-permit if you don't understand the script that's running in your head? I started doing morning pages because I'm doing the artist way with some of my friends. And it's this practice where you do 3 pages of like journaling every morning, just writing down what you think. And I realized so many mornings I wake up with the same thought pattern again and again and again and again. And I realized that we just play the same thoughts on loop. And so if that's the case, why don't you make the script something that's empowering and something that's energizing and something that's good for you, rather than, am I good enough? When is it going to work out for me? Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe this is not going to work, all this kind of stuff. And so these are my biggest tips in the 3 areas of life that I feel validation and permission have really affected me. I'm curious to know where it affects you. So comment down below, where in your life are you seeking validation and permission? And how can you learn to self-validate and self-permit? I think that's going to take you 10 steps ahead of trying to stop caring what other people think about you. Because caring what people think about you is not bad. It's nice. It's important to have empathy for the people in your life, to give them a spot at the table. But I think the most important thing is, are you giving yourself a seat at the table as well? And are you making yourself the head of that table? Because it's your life. It's your life. And so how can you do that today? Let me know what your reflections are. Please reach out on the podcast Instagram and TikTok. In the comments, let me know what you want to see. And stay tuned, because next week we're going to be back with another interview and inspiring conversation. Thank you so much.